from this recap of the ETH trade that there's a lot of focus on multiple layers, one of them being the vector, and the other one watching the structure of price action. ETH lately has moved quite a bit because just overnight news and volatility of the market at this point. But this gap here was something I was definitely watching on NQ, and I was watching 500 and 400 because those are big psychological levels. 600, 500, 400. It's just one of those things that the institutions watch out for. And as this kept on pushing down after a retest of this high, which is actually around the open as well, I only have the closed candles visible here. It was going to push back down because it basically operated as a rule of two. So it just kept pushing down and down and down towards 400. Mind you just got to be careful if you're going to try to force this in between 500 and 400. These are just normal psychological levels, especially when they line up with psychological levels of QQQ after the conversion. So this is pushing down, and as it's pushing down, I'm watching the 1 minute and 5 minute vectors. And it keeps on breaking. This is not a clean side exit. So you got to be aware of that so that you don't force an entry too early. But here it appears like a side exit, but it's not very clean. And when it comes back down, you're seeing this revision of the vector. It's going lower and lower and lower. So we should expect momentum to continue to push down. But one of the things that I noticed is that around 7:30, I was watching this real time. We had this impulse move down. And typically, especially with slippage during ETH, typically I see this as a sign of some sudden interest. I see this as a sign of sudden interest at this level of 400. And I use it as a minor note, kind of like an asterisk, to say pay attention to 400. I expected us to go back up because not only of the gap fill, but because of some odds that were working for retesting this high that was set in on Friday. And so, although this is below the 1 minute vector here, I expected to see some recovery, and it really started recovering within a minute. And actually, what I did was I didn't get afraid when holding. I started holding here because I saw this flatten out unusually longer than what was happening before. I was watching this throughout the evening. So once I saw that there was a repeated support here with the vector flattening out for an extended period of time, I got in, I think, around 4:15. And you don't have to obsess over a perfect entry as long as you're managing your risk with the proper stop loss. So setting it at the bottom or near the bottom, and then finding that this vector, while it appeared like it was going to staircase down, this was already moving up. And then it revised to provide some support. Well, the thing is, when holding there, this came back down overnight. And the thing about overnight trades that I've seen for myself is that you're not able to obviously manage your trade throughout the night. So you need to set a confident stop loss that you're okay with getting hit. And for me, that was beneath the low. And with proper management of sizing, if it got hit, you don't need to worry about it getting hit and waking up. Well, this was ranging all night. And this ended up flying. And that's really what it comes down to. Finding support here, psychological level. We had an impulsive move, which gave me a sign that there's interest around this level. Either exhaustion or to the downside, or there's buyers that are starting to come in. I don't know the full explanation always, but there's sudden interest. And so I set the stop underneath and just held. Well, we came up quite a bit, obviously. 100 plus points, 125, and it just kept climbing and climbing and climbing. Well, don't just use the 1 minute for confirmation. You can use the 5 as well. What the 5 will tell you is a similar story. And that is, we're finding support and interest at this level. We hit a side exit here. And the thing is, if you would have gotten in on this side exit and set your stop at the bottom, it would have been perfect. And that's what you can do, especially at 5 minute. You can enter on side exit, set your stop at the previous low. So what is that? 25, maybe about 30 ticks. If you did 2 micros, 4 times 30 is 120 on MNQ. That's actually pretty good. 3 micros, 6 times 30, 180. Stop loss. Let's just say 200. But you would have caught, and you see finding support, tabletop. Now, exiting. One of the things that I want to encourage you to do on a regular basis and include this in your repertoire for setting targets is using the neural levels. And if you would have used the neural levels for NQ, which are available around for the weekly and daily on Mondays around 8:30 a.m. Eastern or 9 Eastern, you would have seen that the high expected up target for the day was 609.67, and the other two targets 542 and 549. And what you would have seen here is what? 542, 549. Just hold. Even on these retests, you could have held and find confidence for holding because of the tabletop setups on the 5 minute. And then it started breaking above. And if you just held, because there was support being shown, all the way to 609 as your final target, you would have almost top ticked the day, which would have been really awesome. But also keeping in mind that this would have set you up for the short, because when you looked at the command for !W cross, you would have seen that we would have been hanging out on the higher side, the upside targets quite a bit. And the rest of the week has targets down here, which is definitely something to keep in mind. Unless we get an outlier go crazy above, it's not likely. You can take this, and this gives you bias for the rest of the week on different days. Come back, revisit this, look at what the vector is doing, the fractal vector here, and how it's moving towards these targets. So that's actually pretty good insight for what might happen, high probability for the rest of the week, using neurals by themselves. But what you would have seen here is that on the ES charts, if you did some comparison with some of the free ES charts you get with Milk's analysis, we're here ranging in the RTH gap on ES, which is basically what was also taking place, the gap that was also there for open of ETH. So you could have set your limit take profit at 609, top ticked, and then wait as this comes back down, range, and then I did this call out when I was looking at this, knowing what the neurals were looking like for the rest of the week and for the day. lining this up with resistance being shown around 450. I'm sorry, 540 to 560. I give myself a buffer, and that's why I said 550, especially with the volatility of NQ. And holding below, especially because we had hit our target during RTH, which is what those neuro levels are typically sensitive to. Quite sensitive to RTH because market makers don't want the indices oftentimes to want these levels to be absent from being present in the price action in RTH. It's just how a lot of these levels work. It's not often that they will want that level to just only be addressed during ETH, but also RTH. So I expected a revisit. And then when things started breaking down, we had this impulse move down. And I was watching this chop between pivot and secondary pivot on ES. And I had conviction to get in because not only was this entire area an RTH gap from previous sessions, because what we saw overnight was an ETH gap, and then when this opened, it got closed. But those RTH gaps are very, very important to watch. This again, the 609 was really, I got that level from the neuro level. Cross and W cross, remember that when you're using the moose bot. On the impulse down, this 550 area that I mentioned was something I was watching because we were stuck within an area where there was 10% probability of going beyond. And we did have some price exploration above, but if you look at the ES chart that's provided for free in Milk Analysis, there is 10% above. We've been getting a lot of outlier moves lately. Markets are obviously crazy, but that's definitely something to keep in mind. Odds still work for you. Odds still work for you. So that 10% above, I was watching this to keep pushing down. And if you were to have gotten in when I mentioned the alert or signal, you would have been around 530 or 520, and this high here was about 540. And so what happened, I give myself some buffer room, especially with using ES context, but looking at NQ price action, I give myself a buffer. Now, sometimes price will move about a 50 point to 50 point on NQ to a 7 point on ES. That is not exact science. Okay, it's just something very, 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 very not exact. I'll just put it that way. But it's just helpful to get some context. And so I was watching that, and then when I set that alert, sent out that signal, it moved within minutes and didn't range again. It just pushed down, retested this 15-minute vector, had a weak close above. But if you were looking at the 5-minute, you had much clearer picture. Close, retest, wick, boom, keep moving. And this 330 level I got from the neuro levels. So keep it simple. Neuro levels up, neuro level down. And because we were on the weekly neuro levels chart near the high for the whole week, it helped me have some bias for catching a short on the way down, especially because, again, this was a revisit of Friday's high. And there was no strong holding above. Very, very just explorative. So keep it simple. I mean, we're holding below here, 550. Yes, 550 is not a psychological level. It's exactly between 600 and 600 and 500. But the context is we've revisited a high. We're coming down. And I am getting bounces on my 5-minute vector. But the 1 minute, is trying to give me lower revisions. So while, yes, in one regard, this could be viewed as a tabletop, it's a weak tabletop. The vector's trying to revise me down. Yes, it matches that previous low. That's part of how the vector works, but it's trying to give me a picture of going downwards. And in conjunction, again, with the weekly neural levels, we are around the high of the week in this area. I encourage you to add that to your toolbox if you haven't already. And we came back down real strong to that 330 to 350, as I mentioned. And it's possible we might go back up. So, hope this is helpful. If you have any questions, any feedback, let me know. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. All right. Rule of 2. Dragging down, breaking vectors, failed, sloppy side exits, 400 psychological level. Set stop. We hit a 5-minute clean side exit. Set stop below previous low. It held. Impulse move. Told me there was interest. Move up. Held. 5-minute tabletops. 5-minute tabletops. At around 8:30 to 9 a.m. Eastern, I got the 609 level. Almost top ticked. Came down. Saw this ranging between pivot and secondary pivot on ES. 550, gave myself a buffer, holding below, cast a short to 330 neural level. All right, let me know what you think, and I'll respond to any questions you may have. Take care.